Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, which is the HSJCC's Network's Year in Review webinar. Just a few housekeeping items to begin with. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. Throughout the webinar, you can ask a question, and that's in the chat box. Make sure that you direct your questions to all panelists and attendees. And the webinar, as you've just heard, the automated message, the webinar is being recorded. The recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be sent out following the webinar and posted on our website. There'll also be a brief evaluation survey following the webinar. Please complete that as well. We're also going to do a land acknowledgement, and I'm going to be doing that based on where I'm located, which is the Niagara region. We acknowledge our presence on the ancestral lands governed by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Nation, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the lands and resources around the Great Lakes. For many thousands of years, Indigenous peoples, starting with the Anishinaabe, have lived on this land. And when the newcomers arrived, they helped the first travelers to this territory and shared their knowledge for survival in what was at times a harsh climate. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Indigenous peoples with whom the Upper Canada Treaties were signed in good faith and are now maintained by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is also home to many Métis and Inuit people, and all of us, both Indigenous and newcomers, are treaty people, equally responsible to uphold the treaties first made here. One of the most overrepresented populations that the HSJCC serves are Indigenous peoples. To me, this is part of the reason that a land acknowledgement is so important. When we talk about trauma, when we talk about adverse childhood experiences, when we talk about many of the reasons that bring our clients to our services, we're talking about the effects of not only historic events involving Indigenous peoples, but about things that continue to happen today. The word reconciliation is used a great deal, though even as a fairly passive observer, I don't know that much has been accomplished in pursuit of it. At the HSJCC, we deal with issues at both the systems level and the service delivery level, and true reconciliation would involve changes at both levels, and in some cases go well beyond our scope. However, I know from over 2 decades of involvement, especially with local committees, that we can affect change at the service delivery level, and I hope that we can keep doing that with reconciliation in mind as more than a trendy buzzword. Thank you. About the HSJCC network, we're a network comprised of 39 local committees, 14 regional committees, and 1 provincial HSJCC. Each is a voluntary collaboration between health and social service organizations, community mental health and addiction organizations, and partners from the justice sector, including Crown attorneys, judges, police services, and correctional service providers. We'll now do introductions, and I'll turn it over to Tasha.
Hi everyone, my name is Tasha Rennie, and I am the Network Engagement and Communications Officer for the HSJCC Secretariat.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Candace Vena, and I'm the Project Manager for the HSJCC Secretariat. I've been with the Secretariat for almost 4 years now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. We had not determined our order. Go ahead, Justin.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin De La Pena, the Junior Policy Analyst for the HSJCC.
Thanks, Justin. And I'm Christine, the Justice Lead Policy Analyst for CMHA Ontario, and I provide policy support to the HSJCC.
Great, thanks everyone. And so before we get started, we wanted to do a quick poll just to get a sense of who's joining us today. So I'm going to launch that now, and our question is just about how are you involved, if you are involved within the HSJCC network. So I'm launching that now, and we'll just give everyone a minute to complete that. And we also wanted to kind of find out where everyone's joining us from. So if you'd like, you can type into the chat and just let us know what area, what region you come from. Thanks. All right, it looks like most people have completed it, so I'll end it here and we can just take a look at those results. So it looks like we have a nice kind of split of folks from different local committees, as well as regional committees, a few of our provincial members, and several folks who are not currently on an HSJCC, but interested in learning more. So really happy to have everyone here, and thanks for sharing what region you're joining from as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Candace.
Great, thanks so much, Tasha, and thanks everyone for completing that poll and writing in the chat. It's always great to see where everyone's from. And for those of you who are new to the network, it's always great for us to start off with a little bit of background and history. So Tasha, if you could go to our first slide here, which shows a network at the glance. Before the HSJCC was established, there was a recognized need between the human services and justice sectors that we need to coordinate resources and services for people who have unique, complex human service needs who have come into contact with the criminal justice system. The network has actually been around since 1997 by an act of provincial legislation that was led by 4 partner ministries, with the Ministry of Health leading and funding, endorsing the establishment of committees across the province. Our other 3 partner ministries are the Ministry of the Attorney General, the Ministry of the Solicitor General, and the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. The establishment of these committees are really voluntary collaborations. So people from the network are made up of professionals from the human services and justice sectors who are coming together, doing this work off the side of their desk to better coordinate services and really improve outcomes for priority populations. The HSJCC network does have priority consideration populations within those complex human services needs, which include, but are not, of course, limited to individuals with complex mental health issues, substance use issues, neurodevelopmental and neurocognitive disabilities, as some examples. Our committees operate across the province at a local, regional, and provincial level. And all provide education and training for our members, as well as working together to coordinate care for individuals and addressing those system level issues. Tasha, if you just want to go to the next slide, we show a map here of where our HSJCCs are located. So it's really great representation across Ontario. And as Trevor indicated in the introduction, we have 39 local HSJCCs across the province, which that number sometimes does change depending on the need in a particular community to serve their clientele. So they are focused on education and training, but also on specifically local issues and care coordination at all stages of the justice system. And then we have 14 regional HSJCCs across the province, again, focused on education and training, but really looking at system change initiatives on a regional level and addressing some of those local issues that come up from those local committees. And then we have 1 provincial HSJCC, which is focused on policy projects and system change initiatives. And I will be talking a little bit more about what that committee does and what our objectives are. So just briefly wanted to touch on us as the Secretariat, who we are and how we support this network. So prior to 2015, Secretariat actually didn't exist. And as I indicated, the network was operating in voluntary capacity. So we were very grateful to receive funding from the Ministry of Health and at that time, long-term care, to be able to have paid staff to support the HSJCC network, both at the provincial level as well as supporting our regional and local committees and the overall infrastructure of the network. We are a small team here housed at CMHA Ontario that provides support in implementing the objectives of the work plan of the provincial table, and as I said, more broadly, HSJCC infrastructure. Some of the activities and support that we provide is in project management, the overall coordination and administration of the network, supporting with work planning for our committees at all levels, and reporting on the activities that they have done from the year prior, communications and knowledge exchange, which Tasha will get into all of those pieces, as well as member engagement support to ensure that our members feel connected to the work that they do and are coming together in a meaningful way, identifying issues at all levels of the network, and identifying solutions to those issues. And of course, public policy, our advice and analysis is a big portion of our work in supporting the network. So just wanted to talk about the Provincial HSJCC. So the Provincial HSJCC was first developed as that leadership mechanism and provincial planning body to support the overall implementation of that initial policy framework. And that provincial table really looks at supporting obviously those individual and collective efforts of what's happening on the ground from our regional and local HSJCCs across the province. But of course, focusing on provincial level policy issues that we see and making recommendations to our ministry partners and other stakeholders that we determine, identifying solutions to system problems across Ontario and promoting that consistency of approach, but also recognizing that there are different issues in different areas of the province. What might be issues seen in Northwestern Ontario may look a little bit different than the GTA here. And then a big portion of our work really is sharing information across the HSJCC network, but also beyond that to other, the general public and other sectors that may come into contact with the human services and justice sectors. And the Provincial HSJCC really is made up of those 14 regional representations, as well as our 4 partner ministries and other provincial bodies that provide their expertise and guidance to various areas of work that we do. And so just wanted to touch on how does the Provincial HSJCC really identify its work planning and its priorities, as you will kind of see as we talk about some of the work that we've done from the past year and what we're looking ahead to. So the Provincial HSJCC operates in 3-year work plans. So every 3 years, we conduct a priority setting exercise where we consult with all of our regional and local committees, all of our partner ministries and other provincial stakeholders and bodies that provide their feedback on some trends, some challenges and opportunities that they see happening within their regions that they would like to see addressed at the provincial level. We take all of this information and the Provincial HSJCC uses it to inform our own 3-year work plan cycle and priorities. So you'll see here, we've noted there was 8 kind of top priorities identified for 2019 to 2022. So we are coming to the last year of our work plan cycle here. We address a number of these issues through kind of 3 main areas, through our network support of the function, through our knowledge exchange work, so through webinars, knowledge exchange events, our website, and then finally through our public policy and advocacy and provincial projects work, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And I think I'm going to leave it there and pass it over to Tasha to talk about our last year.
Thanks, Candace. So I just wanted to provide kind of a high-level overview of some of the accomplishments of the HSJCC network during that 2020-2021 fiscal year. And first, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about our planning and reporting process, which is really what we use to guide all of the project work and all of the activities for the network. So each of the committees within our network participates in two parts of this process. The first is the work planning process, and which serves to help us kind of outline our activities for the year ahead. So each committee will submit a work plan in March of every year. And then the second component is the annual reporting. So each committee will submit an annual report for the previous fiscal year, which really outlines many of its key deliverables and the outcomes from that year. And so both of these components are really a valuable part of our network in that it really helps us make sure that there's a structure of accountability across the network, and that accountability both to our funders and also demonstrating the value and the accomplishments of the network to the community at large. So it's a really great way just to kind of highlight some of the accomplishments and see what has happened across the network each year. And we did do a webinar on this network reporting process for the purpose of supporting our local and regional co-chairs. So you can find that and more resources on understanding this process a bit more on our website. And so in terms of our some of the accomplishments over that fiscal year, of course, 2020-2021 was a very different year for everyone, and certainly it had a lot of impacts on the operations of many of our regional and local committees. Because of the pandemic, a lot of our tables were forced to kind of adapt a lot of their processes, the way that they're working, and also shift a lot of their priorities, which did have an impact on, you know, the planned activities they had for the year and the way that they were able to operate. So in order to kind of address some of the emerging issues that were impacting some of our priority populations and client populations, our local and regional committees had to kind of shift a lot of their work. And so a few things, there's one thing that we wanted to highlight in terms of some of our accomplishments for that year. Because of the pandemic, the Provincial HSJCC decided to reallocate a portion of its discretionary funds towards the regional and local committees, which they could use to directly support their client populations. So each committee was able to kind of determine what would be the best use of funds that would really provide support to their clients during this time of crisis, essentially, in different communities. And so we saw a lot of really great project work and things that were done with these funds. And just to highlight a couple examples here, so gift cards were purchased for clients, so to cover things like food and basic needs. Many committees have put together release from custody kits, so providing some necessary needs for folks being released from custody. Other supplies like pens and other supplies for clients and caregivers. Things like bus passes and tokens for transportation needs, tablets for clients, of course, with the transition towards virtual care as well as virtual court processes. That was a really big need for a lot of communities. Cell phones and calling cards, as well as emergency housing, so things like hotel accommodations. And so these are just in addition to a number of other activities that were completed by our regional local committees during this time. Just wanted to highlight a few of these. And so moving on to our Provincial HSJCC's accomplishments for that year. Just have kind of a high level look here at some of our accomplishments. So during that year, we held 14 meetings virtually. Because of the pandemic, we switched to a more frequent meeting schedule and some virtual meetings, of course, to provide that opportunity for updates and information sharing. We made 6 submissions to government during that time, and we held 5 issue management sessions on topics including our approach to release from custody issues, our approach to addressing anti-racism, our response to the rollout of COVID-19 vaccine within correctional institutions, and discussions around exemptions to the Police Record Check Reform Act, as well as closures of youth justice centers. So during that time, we also engaged with a number of our partner ministries and stakeholders in a few different ways. And so that included consultations with the Solicitor General on regulatory changes for Ontario's correctional system, and consultations with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs, and MCCSS on improving supporting housing for justice-involved individuals. And we have also heard a number of educational presentations from various stakeholders. And we have a number of communications and knowledge exchange activities that we accomplished during that time as well. And we'll go into all of this in more detail in some of the following sections. But of course, we had 4 newsletters, 3 member engagement sessions, 1 knowledge exchange event, and 7 educational webinars. And then just wanted to touch briefly on some of the provincial HSJCCs activities regarding our response to COVID-19. Because of the pandemic, we switched to our virtual meetings starting on a bi-weekly basis in April 2020. Those were just really intended to give an opportunity to hear updates from regional HSJCCs and really problem solve and deal with some of the emerging issues during that time. We put together a COVID-19 resource page on our HSJCC website, and we made multiple submissions to our partner ministries, really highlighting some of the areas of greater concern during the pandemic for our partners and our members in the human services and justice sectors. And with that, I'll pass it over to Christine.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Tasha. I'll just provide an overview of some of our provincial HSJCC projects and policy work over the past year. Yeah, feel free to, thank you. So this year, like last year, we did submit a pre-budget submission to government. And really, this is an opportunity for us to demonstrate our achievements, the impact of the network, and then to recommend long-term dedicated investments for some of our mental health and justice initiatives. So our top funding priorities were determined by the provincial table and really kind of mirror some of those 3-year priorities Candace was speaking to, including supportive housing for justice-involved individuals, release from custody and the need for consistent discharge planning across the province, and expanding crisis response, including mobile crisis response teams and non-police crisis response alternatives. The budget also highlights the impact of COVID-19 on our service delivery efforts and the need for dedicated investments beyond the pandemic. And it requests an increase to our annualized funding to continue our work supporting our priority populations. Next slide, please. As Tasha mentioned, we did submit a number of letters in response to proposed legislative and regulatory changes, both this year from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. So first, regarding the Police Record Check Reform Act, some proposed exemptions that would exist for categories of employers or volunteer coordinators to allow them to see a client's police record, including their mental health record. So as we've said in the past, the table came out with the messaging that these records should not be disclosed to employers or volunteer organizations, as they create unfair barriers and contribute to the stigma, discrimination, and social exclusion that these clients experience, and especially those from BIPOC communities. We also submitted a proposal, a submission in response to a proposal on segregation changes. So we called for an arm's length independent review body. This is something that we have asked for in the past. Supportive specialized care placements for clients with complex needs. So they're not relegated to the segregation cells. Increased training on mental health and addictions issues, neurodevelopmental disabilities and brain injuries, and other complex conditions for all correctional staff. Broadening the definition of mental illness to include everyone who might be at risk of harm if placed in segregation. Mental health supports for all those in corrections. And we offered our support to the ministry to help create some of these screening tools, training, discharge planning, and other supports. Thanks, Tasha. We also released our housing and justice report earlier this year. This report comes following a provincial forum that was held in February 2020 on housing and justice that convened experts, people with lived experience, and others from across the province. And this report really hones in on the key themes and recommendations from the day, including at the service delivery level, so mandatory anti-oppression and equity focused training for landlords and service providers, increased access to community legal services, and increased collaboration and cooperation between partners. And then at the system level, those dedicated long-term investments in supportive housing, a provincial strategy to ensure consistent discharge planning, and revising the ODSP and OW policies Ontario works so that these benefits continue when individuals are incarcerated for an extended period of time. And our report's available on our website. And I'll turn it over to Candace now to talk about a few of the forums that we hosted this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. So yeah, just wanted to highlight two really exciting forums that we had this year. And for those that are not familiar, the Provincial HSJCC has looked at specialized courts for a number of years now. The Specialized Courts Forum really builds off of previous work that was done to survey the initiation and operation of mental health courts across Ontario, as well as looking at a scan of drug treatment courts across the province and how some of their service delivery has been impacted by COVID-19. So in March 2021, we hosted a 2-day virtual forum to bring folks together to share and discuss promising practices on how we can improve those court supports for individuals with mental health, addictions, and other complex needs. So really focusing on mental health and drug treatment courts, but also looking at some of the other specialized courts that exist across the province. We brought together stakeholders from across the HSJCC network who either work in those courts or our policymakers, as well as those with lived experience. We had a number of amazing keynote speakers during the day. Justice Kobe Barnes, who is the co-founder of Canada's first drug treatment court. Nicoletta Curson, who is someone who has lived experience and a recent graduate of Toronto's drug treatment court, who spoke to her experience and recommendations for the future. And we had the privilege of having the Honorable Pamela Williams, who is the Chief Judge of Nova Scotia's Provincial and Family Courts, talk about some of the promising practices that they have on their specialized courts in Nova Scotia. There was also presentations, like I said, on the previous work that was done on mental health and drug treatment courts, and a number of panel discussions in the afternoon. We had a judges panel that focused on sharing best practices for these courts from their perspectives, identifying some of those emerging issues that we've seen during the pandemic, but also in the past couple of years, and shifting to virtual courts, obviously during COVID-19, the challenges and some of the unique ways that they've had to adapt and come together to continue to serve clients in the best way possible. So for those who might have missed it, the full recording, the graphics, all of the resources that we talked about during the forum are available on our website. And just going to the next slide, another great forum that we had this year was the Survivors of Homicide Victim Forum. For those that aren't familiar, this is a project led up by the Center for Research and Innovation for Black Survivors of Homicide Victims, also known as the CRIB, and the Canadian Mental Health Association, Ontario. The Provincial HSJCC is also a partner in this work and co-hosted the forum with these groups back in April 2021. This project really is very innovative for Ontario and all for Canada, as it is exploring the impact of homicide on the mental health and well-being of Indigenous, African, Caribbean, Black, and other racialized survivors of homicide victims and their service providers, which typically hasn't been looked at here in Ontario. There were two different forums that culminated the work that's been done over the last year or so on this project. One was a knowledge exchange forum where we heard about insights from focus groups that were conducted with service providers and survivors on how we can engage in the provision of culturally responsive care, and really creating that model and training curriculum for service providers to be able to adapt it to serve the needs of their communities. And then we had a public policy forum following this, where again, we brought together survivors as well as service providers and really wanted to develop those policy recommendations to our ministry partners and stakeholders on how we can better enhance those culturally conscious services and that continuity of care for survivors of homicide victims. And I'll pass it back over to Christine to take a look at the year ahead.
Thanks so much, Candace. So first, looking at the next steps for the Survivors Project that Candace provided a great overview of our work to date for. A funding opportunity exists with the Anti-Racism Directorate to address gaps in knowledge or service provision and support for the provision of mental health services for Indigenous, African, Caribbean, and Black and racialized survivors of homicide victims. So a request for proposals was opened earlier this summer, available to forum participants to demonstrate how they might use these funds to show creative use of the knowledge gained at these forums. So the next steps are to determine the awards of the RFP and then to support these projects as they continue over the next year or so, and then completion of those projects and a final report to the Anti-Racism Directorate. Our Mobile Crisis and Response Teams project is also ongoing. So as a reminder, this is a partnership with the Ontario Provincial Police, CMHA Ontario, the Provincial HSJCC, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of the Solicitor General. And their provincial framework and toolkit includes resources for service providers, including data collection and evaluation, privacy and information sharing, training resources, community supports, including alternative response models, funding proposals, budget templates, and communications tools. So some really great resources in there. It's currently being reviewed by the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. So we're grateful to have their insight and privacy expertise applied to these documents. We'll then translate those documents into French and then work with our provincial working group and ministry partners to develop final versions, which should be published sometime in the next few months or so. So looking forward to that. Next slide there. Thank you. Another project we have ongoing is the impact of cannabis on drug treatment courts in Ontario. So this project is funded by the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and it's a partnership between the Provincial HSJCC, John Howard Society of Ontario, CMHA Ontario, People with Lived Experience, and Dr. Akwasi Owusu-Bempah, Associate Professor at the University of Toronto. The project is also guided by an advisory committee of a number of organizations with expertise or interest in this area. And the purpose of the project is to assess the mental health and cannabis use among participants in drug treatment courts across Ontario. So far, the Research Ethics Board at John Howard Society approved the project proposal in March of this year, and we've been building relationships with representatives from drug treatment courts across Ontario. So currently, our initial survey to participants in drug treatment courts and service providers at Ontario's drug treatment courts are underway. So our next step is to collect those survey results to prepare a status update for the Mental Health Commission of Canada, including some of the challenges that have been associated with these courts due to COVID-19, issues with virtual courts, court operations, and participation. Following this, we'll be distributing follow-up surveys to those participants and service providers, and then analyzing those results for our final report for the Mental Health Commission of Canada. Thank you.
And of course, I'm on mute. Sorry, everyone. So we just wanted to take a look at some of our advisory committees that the Provincial HSJCC has established, particularly over the last year in response to a number of recognized needs. So the first one that we wanted to talk about here today was the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. And this really came from a request from our regional and local HSJCC members in a need to identify and have direction from the provincial table to address anti-racism across the human services and justice sectors. The Provincial HSJCC first approved the establishment of which is now a standing committee for the Provincial HSJCC to oversee and guide the development of a provincial strategy to address anti-racism at all levels across our network. So really the objectives of that committee is to identify some of the challenges that we're seeing related to anti-racism and develop evidence-based solutions and actions, provide guidance at all levels of HSJCCs to improve active engagement of Black, Indigenous, and racialized populations within their work, to promote some of those best practices and key considerations for improving experiences of those populations who are involved in the human services and justice sectors, and of course be that advisory body to the Provincial HSJCC to make sure we're addressing anti-racism in all of our efforts in our projects and initiatives. We did send out a survey to all of our regional and local committees this summer, which was great to get some information on where they are at and what they see the need is in getting direction from the provincial table. Those results will help inform our project work over the coming years. So focusing in on knowledge exchange opportunities, member engagement work, and of course, the development of a provincial framework.
Thanks, Candace. Another new advisory committee established this year is the Transition from Custody Network. So this was established in response, again, to the provincial table, recognizing that there was a need to bring together service providers, people with lived experience, and other community members to address issues faced by individuals leaving correctional facilities across Ontario, and a lot of those issues that had been exacerbated by COVID-19. So our membership is quite broad. It includes a lot of people with lived experience, correctional personnel, probation and parole officers, law enforcement, legal professionals, reintegration services, Indigenous organizations, mental health and addiction services, and organizations serving clients with brain injuries and other complex needs. And it's a large group of around 90 or so active members. The objectives of the network include identifying common challenges to support these individuals as they're discharged from correctional facilities, promoting and sharing best practices and key considerations for improving outcomes, and ensuring access to housing and other necessary services is equitable by addressing systemic racism and implementing anti-Indigenous racism and anti-Black racism policies and practices into the work of this network. As well, identifying and promoting services for individuals who identify as Two-Spirit, LGBTQ+, with a focus on those who are Two-Spirit and or trans, just given the unique needs of that population as well. And then to provide ongoing advice to the Provincial HSJCC on all matters relating to release from custody issues. And currently the issue that we're looking at is late releases from correctional facilities and the challenges involved with those individuals as they try to seek transportation and housing when they're released after most services have closed for the day. So we're creating a survey that will be distributed to people with lived experience, family members, and service providers to really try to dive into these issues, but also to see where practices are working well across the province and where these communication and other habits can be duplicated with other correctional facilities and partners around Ontario. Thanks.
Great. And so one of our other advisory committees that's been very active over the past year is our Persons with Lived Experience Advisory Committee. So this committee was first convened in April 2020. The HSJCC Network has for a very long time recognized the value of having persons with lived experience participate in their work. But we were hearing from our committees that there was some need for additional guidance around how to improve this engagement and really improve it in a very meaningful and respectful way. So the purpose of this advisory committee was to kind of oversee these activities and really focus on improving the representation and active involvement of persons with lived experience in both the human services and justice sectors in all levels of HSJCC work. And so as a part of this work, we conducted 2 surveys in the fall to kind of give us a sense of the areas of greatest need and to really inform the direction of our project work. One survey was conducted of local and regional co-chairs to get a sense of how many persons with lived experience are currently engaged and what are kind of the big areas of the big issues and the big areas that committees could use support in. And the second survey was conducted of current members who identify as persons with lived experience to get a better sense of their experiences participating in HSJCCs, and again, see if there are any ideas or things that they thought would really help improve those experiences. So with all of the information from those surveys, we've been working over the past year to develop a resource that our local and regional committees could use to kind of embark in this engagement process. So whether that's with current members, finding ways to improve that engagement, or finding new members and attracting them to join the committees. And so what that will look like is a resource that has a number of strategies, additional kind of resources and ideas that committees can use to improve this engagement in a very meaningful way. So we're kind of wrapping up this project in terms of developing that resource and just kind of finalizing it, and we'll be looking forward to releasing it in the fall. And as a part of that, we'll be presenting at the HSJCC conference in November. So feel free to join that session if you want to learn a bit more, at which point the resource will be released to the network and folks can kind of get a look at that as well. And so our next section here is just a look at some of our communications and knowledge exchange, as well as member engagement activities from the past year. So the first one I wanted to mention is our Provincial HSJCC conference. So typically every other year we will hold a conference for our members. But because of the pandemic, we decided that our next conference will be held virtually. And we're really excited about this because we feel like it will provide a great opportunity for a lot of our members from across the province who typically aren't able to attend to really participate in this event. So it's going to be held November 16th and 17th this year. And it really is, you know, one of our biggest events for this network. It brings together folks from across the province, many of our active members, as well as members in the community, and provides a lot of opportunities for learning, information sharing, learning about best practices, and really networking across the province. So our registration is currently open. So really hoping that everyone will kind of take a look at that and be sure to register. For our HSJCC members, we have a special price, so you can find that on our website. And we have a few announcements coming up pretty soon in terms of our keynote speakers. But if you go on our website right now, you can see many of the concurrent sessions that we have and some of the themes and topics we'll be focusing on. So really hoping to see everybody there. So just looking at our communications and knowledge exchange activities a bit more, one of our other advisory committees that we have for the Provincial HSJCC is our Communications and Knowledge Exchange, or CKE committee. And their purpose is to provide advice and direction to all of our communications and knowledge exchange activities. Because our network is made up of folks from different sectors from across the province, we really understand that opportunity to share information, for knowledge exchange, for learning from people who come from different backgrounds and folks who come from different sectors is really, really a huge value for folks and a big incentive in terms of joining this network and participating. So the purpose of this committee is really to help facilitate that information sharing and the flow of information. In terms of our activities for this committee over the past year, we put out a call for new members back in the fall, which was a great opportunity to welcome some new people to join. And as part of that, we revised our terms of reference and took a look at how we had kind of been functioning over the past little while. As a part of our activities, we conducted a webinar topic survey of the network in January to give us a sense of what are some of the topics and speaker ideas our network is really interested in learning about. And in general, this committee will focus on things like our HSJCC website maintenance, planning topics and speakers for webinars, planning our newsletters and other kind of communications activities. And we're always looking for new members. So if you're on an HSJCC and you have some interest in kind of participating in this, feel free to send me an email and we'll be happy to have you join. And we kind of looked at this a bit earlier, but some of our CKE activities from this past year include our HSJCC webinars. We put out regular newsletters with updates from the network. We maintain a mailing list of about 1,700 people. And so we use that mailing list to let people know about our webinars and our newsletters and other upcoming events. So please make sure you've signed up for updates. You can find that on our website. And we're also active on social media, so you can connect with us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And then, of course, our website is a huge resource for us. It's where you can find all information about all of these projects. All of our individual committees have their own pages. So really welcome you to check that out and yeah, make sure you're on our mailing list as well. And I wanted to talk really quickly about our member engagement activities for this past year. So our member engagement work has been ongoing for a couple years, since 2017, when we released the member engagement plan. And so the purpose of this was really to help our committees improve the engagement, the participation, and the involvement of their members. Since our committees are made up of mostly volunteers, you know, there are always issues in terms of communication and participation. So we're really working as a secretariat to support committees in finding ways to improve that engagement. And in terms of our activities over the past year, we facilitated 3 engagement sessions with a few different local and regional HSJCCs. And the purpose of these sessions is to kind of facilitate a workshop and a discussion with each individual committee to talk about what are some of their big issues when it comes to engagement, and to kind of develop some strategies that are really tailored to their specific needs. So that's something that's ongoing for us. If there are any co-chairs or committee members who feel like they'd like to learn more about member engagement support from the Secretariat, please feel free to connect with us. And you can also find this guide on our website. Now I'll just pass it over to Candace.
Thanks, Tasha. And I'm just being mindful of the time here. I want to make sure we have time for questions for everyone, but did want to flag our upcoming priorities. So as I mentioned earlier, the Provincial HSJCC operates in 3-year work plan cycles. So we're really excited that in this coming October, we'll be sending out a priority setting exercise to our regional and local HSJCCs, our ministry partners and other stakeholders, as I mentioned, to really gain some insights into some of the trends and opportunities for the next 3 years for the Provincial HSJCC. I think that it's an extremely unique time considering we're coming out of a pandemic. We know that there's a number of issues that have been longstanding issues for the network, but have been further exacerbated by the pandemic. There are new, unique opportunities and ways of shifting how we provide service and care for our clients. So really wanting to highlight those within the priority setting exercise. We will be taking all of this information by the end of the year and presenting it to the provincial table to identify those top priorities for 2022 to 2025. And really, it'll help direct the work of the Provincial HSJCC and initiate some new system enhancement and coordination projects so that we can better meet the needs of those individuals who interact with the justice system. So stay tuned for more information on the priority setting exercise.
Great. Thanks. So we have some time now for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box. Before we kind of get into that, I also wanted to launch another poll here, and we have a few questions just to help us get a sense of how us as the Secretariat, how we can better support our committees. So please feel free to complete that poll if it's applicable to you. And then, of course, type any questions you have into the chat box. So I'm just launching the poll now. And we'll just wait and see if there are any questions. Again, type those into the chat box. We'll take a look at the results in a few minutes here. And while we're waiting, I just wanted to mention we have another team member who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but just wanted to include him in our introduction. So that's Andrew Fairburn, who is the network coordinator for the Secretariat. Just give everyone another minute or so for this poll. All right, so I think that's probably hopefully enough time for everyone to complete that. So maybe we can take a look at these results here. Okay. So our first question was about how or what would make members feel more connected to the provincial HSJCC. And it looks like the most responses were for improved communications and information sharing from provincial HSJCC. So, you know, we have things like our newsletters, webinars, information sharing at provincial meetings, highlights that we distribute. So it's good to know that we can kind of look for more opportunities in that area. Another high response was for more knowledge exchange activities, so things like webinars and online training. And then more responses for improved website experience, and then the fewest responses for more direct connection with HSJCC Secretariat. So that's great. And I feel, and you know, if anyone has any kind of specific suggestions that they want to make or recommendations, feel free to type that into the chat. It's great and really helpful for us to kind of hear some of that feedback. So the second question we have here is, what kind of support would you like to receive from the Secretariat moving forward? And it looks like our greatest number of responses was improving member engagement. So that's, again, great to hear, as something we've been working on for the past few years. And again, if people have ideas on more specific activities or types of support, type those into the chat. The second greatest number of votes we have for recruiting new members as well as orientation support. So that's, again, really great to hear. And then developing a vision statement, goals, and objectives. That's really awesome feedback for us, and I think certainly can help us inform our work plan activities for the next year. And yeah, just an opportunity, again, a few more minutes here. If there are any questions or any kind of comments or feedback, feel free to type them into the chat. No questions is sometimes a good thing. I think it means we were very thorough in our our presentation. So yeah, I guess if there aren't any questions or comments, perhaps we can wrap it up here. Just wanted to say thanks again to everyone for joining us today, for taking the opportunity to learn about everything that we've accomplished as a network over the past year. Great to see this turnout. And again, our contact information is here. Feel free to reach out at any point to any member of the Secretariat if you'd like to connect with us. Yeah, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.